Millions in Syria and Iraq are facing water shortages as the region's longest river, the Euphrates, dries up.
The drying up of the Euphrates River is an event of monumental importance, both for its historical significance and the implications it carries for the future of the region and the world. The Euphrates, one of the longest and most storied rivers in the world, stretches over 1,700 miles and has long been the lifeblood of civilizations from ancient Mesopotamia to modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Its gradual disappearance is not just a tale of environmental degradation, but a terrifying signal of the escalating impacts of climate change, regional water mismanagement, and geopolitical tensions. What was discovered as the river dried up is as disturbing as the event itself, revealing ancient ruins, eerie landscapes, and the stark vulnerability of the millions of people who depend on it. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The Euphrates River has always been more than just a waterway. It has been central to the rise of human civilization, forming the backbone of the so-called cradle of civilization. Ancient cities such as Babylon, Uruk, and Mari thrived along its banks, relying on the river for irrigation, transportation, and trade. It was the lifeline for countless generations who harnessed its waters to grow crops, build cities, and sustain life in a harsh environment. The story of the Euphrates is deeply entwined with the history of human progress and its significance in religious and cultural texts, such as the Bible, the Quran, and other ancient writings, only adds to the gravity of its disappearance. As the river has finally dried up in many parts, what has emerged from the muddy banks is both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Archaeologists and locals have uncovered remnants of ancient cities, hidden ruins, and artifacts that had long been submerged beneath the river's waters. These discoveries are like opening a time capsule to the earliest days of human civilization. In some places, well-preserved relics from thousands of years ago have been found, including structures that suggest advanced irrigation systems, religious temples, and even human remains. The Euphrates, once the heart of fertile Mesopotamia, now reveals the bones of past empires, buried by time and forgotten by history until now. While these archaeological finds are fascinating, they are overshadowed by the modern implications of the river's drying up. The Euphrates waters have been receding for decades, driven by a combination of climate change, overuse, dam construction, and conflict. But the rapid acceleration of this trend has caught many by surprise. As the water disappears, it is not just ancient ruins that are uncovered, but also the stark reality of a looming humanitarian crisis. Millions of people who rely on the river for drinking water, farming, and sanitation are now facing a bleak future. The once mighty river, which brought prosperity to civilizations, now threatens to bring devastation in its absence. The environmental impact of the Euphrates drying up is profound. Climate change has altered rainfall patterns in the region, leading to severe droughts that have drastically reduced the river's flow. With less water flowing through the river, the land around it has become arid and inhospitable. Farmlands that once flourished along the Euphrates are now turning to dust, leaving communities that depended on agriculture struggling to survive. The loss of this water source has also affected local wildlife, as species that once thrived in the river's ecosystem are now facing extinction or displacement. The drying up of the Euphrates is not just a localized environmental disaster, it is a harbinger of the broader impacts of global climate change on vulnerable ecosystems. Human activity has played a significant role in hastening the river's demise. Over the past century, the construction of dams along the Euphrates has diverted much of its water for hydroelectric power and irrigation. While these dams have provided benefits for the countries that control them, they have also caused water shortages downstream. This has led to political tensions between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq as each country vies for control over the dwindling water supply. The Euphrates, once a unifying force that linked civilizations, has become a source of conflict, with nations accusing each other of hoarding water and exacerbating the crisis. The drying up of the river has only heightened these tensions, threatening to spark new conflicts over water rights in a region already plagued by war and instability. As the Euphrates recedes, the consequences for the local population are dire. In Iraq and Syria, where the river has historically provided the majority of the water for agriculture, industry, and daily life, Its disappearance has led to widespread water shortages. Farmers who once relied on the river to irrigate their crops are now unable to grow enough food to sustain their families or their communities. Livestock, another critical source of livelihood, has been decimated by the lack of water and grazing land. In urban areas, people are struggling to find enough clean water to drink, leading to the spread of disease and increased mortality rates. The drying up of the Euphrates has transformed what was once a thriving region into a humanitarian disaster zone. The social and economic implications of this disaster are equally alarming. With no water to sustain agriculture, many people are being forced to leave their homes in search of better living conditions elsewhere. This mass migration is contributing to the already significant refugee crisis in the Middle East, where millions have been displaced by war, poverty, and environmental degradation. The Euphrates drying up is not just a local issue. It is contributing to broader patterns of displacement and instability that are rippling across the region and beyond. As people are forced to leave their ancestral lands, the social fabric of entire communities is being torn apart, leading to increased tensions and the potential for further conflict. In addition to the humanitarian and environmental crises, the drying up of the Euphrates has significant geopolitical implications. Control over water has always been a point of contention in the Middle East, but as the river disappears, these tensions are reaching a breaking point. Countries like Turkey, which controls the headwaters of the Euphrates, have built large dams that restrict the flow of water to downstream nations like Syria and Iraq. This has led to accusations of water warfare, with each country blaming the other for exacerbating the crisis. As water becomes scarcer, the potential for conflict over access to this vital resource grows. The drying up of the Euphrates could spark a new wave of regional instability as nations compete for control over what little water remains. Religious and cultural narratives also play a role in how people perceive the drying up of the Euphrates. In both Islamic and Christian eschatology, the river holds a significant place in end times prophecy. For many, the drying up of the Euphrates is seen as a fulfillment of ancient prophecies that signal the approach of the apocalypse. In the Christian book of Revelation, the drying of the river is mentioned as a prelude to the final battle of Armageddon, while in Islamic tradition it is said that the river will dry up to reveal treasures that will spark a great conflict. These beliefs add a layer of fear and urgency to the unfolding events, as some view the river's disappearance not just as an environmental catastrophe, but as a divine warning. The eerie and terrifying aspect of this drying up is also tied to the mysterious discoveries that have been made along the riverbed. As the water receded, locals and archaeologists began to find ancient structures, tunnels, and even cryptic inscriptions that had been hidden for centuries. Some of these discoveries have baffled experts, as they suggest a level of technological advancement in ancient Mesopotamian societies that was previously unknown. In one area, a large underground complex was uncovered, leading some to speculate that it may have been used for religious or ritualistic purposes. The unsettling nature of these finds has only fueled speculation and fear, particularly among those who believe that the drying up of the river is linked to prophetic events. Despite the fascination with these discoveries, the overwhelming feeling in the region is one of fear and uncertainty. The drying up of the Euphrates is not just an archaeological curiosity. It is a living nightmare for the millions of people who depend on the river for their survival. With each passing day, as the riverbed dries further, the situation becomes more desperate. The lack of water is driving people from their homes, destroying livelihoods, and creating the conditions for future conflict. While the ancient ruins uncovered by the receding waters offer a glimpse into the past, they also serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of human civilization. The great empires of Mesopotamia may have crumbled thousands of years ago, but their ruins now lie exposed as a warning to the present. The global community cannot afford to ignore the implications of the Euphrates drying up. The crisis is a sobering reminder of the ways in which environmental degradation, climate change, and human activity can combine to create a perfect storm of disaster. While the immediate effects are being felt in the Middle East, the broader implications could ripple out across the world. Water shortages are already a growing concern in many parts of the globe, and the situation along the Euphrates is a harbinger of what could happen elsewhere if action is not taken. The lessons from the drying up of the Euphrates are clear. humanity must find ways to better manage its natural resources or risk facing the same fate as the ancient civilizations that once thrived along the river's banks. The drying up of the Euphrates River is not merely a localized catastrophe, but a global environmental event with cascading consequences for the broader ecosystem, geopolitical dynamics, and cultural history. While much has already been uncovered about the ancient civilizations that once thrived along its banks, the unrelenting disappearance of the river's flow continues to reveal new, chilling insights into both the past and the uncertain future. The terrifying discoveries beneath the riverbed aren't confined to artifacts alone. The deeper implications tied to the collapse of ecosystems and the societal unraveling tied to its demise are shocking and require urgent consideration. In the years leading up to the final phases of its decline, one of the most alarming aspects of the Euphrates River drying up was its profound impact on agriculture in the region. The river was not just a cultural and historical landmark. It was the source of life for vast swaths of fertile land across Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. In a region where desertification is a constant threat, the Euphrates provided the vital irrigation that transformed dry, inhospitable landscapes into fields capable of sustaining human populations. Farmers depended on its waters to cultivate essential crops such as wheat, barley, and dates. But as the river receded, these fields turned into barren wastelands, and the productivity of the region's agricultural sector plummeted. The rapid loss of farmland has had dire consequences, not only in terms of food security for the region, but also on a global scale. Food shortages caused by the Euphrates drying up have exacerbated an already fragile situation in the Middle East, contributing to soaring food prices and intensifying the global food crisis. The agricultural belt along the Euphrates once played a crucial role in feeding millions of people, but now, with fields lying fallow and irrigation channels dried up, the region's food production has taken a massive hit. The resulting food scarcity has sent shockwaves through global markets, contributing to rising inflation and shortages that are felt even in distant parts of the world. This crisis has highlighted how interconnected the world's food systems have become, and how the failure of one key environmental pillar, such as the Euphrates, can have far-reaching effects that extend well beyond the local region. The drying up of the Euphrates is also creating a ripple effect on the environment in ways that scientists are only beginning to fully understand. Without the flow of fresh water from the river, vast areas of what was once lush farmland are becoming increasingly salty and unsuitable for agriculture. This process, known as salinization, occurs when irrigation water evaporates more quickly than it can be replenished, leaving behind mineral salts in the soil. Over time, these salts accumulate and render the land infertile. The widespread salinization of farmland along the Euphrates basin is contributing to a growing environmental disaster, as the region's delicate ecosystems are being destroyed at an alarming rate. The loss of fertile land is also leading to the destruction of habitats for local wildlife, as species that once thrived in the area are forced to either adapt to the new, harsher environment or face extinction. The drying up of the Euphrates has also exposed the region to greater risk of sandstorms and desertification. Without the moisture provided by the river, the landscape has become more vulnerable to the spread of desert sands, which are slowly encroaching on what was once fertile farmland. This is part of a larger trend affecting much of the Middle East, where desertification is rapidly advancing due to a combination of climate change and poor land management practices. As the sands spread, they bury farmlands, choke out vegetation, and make it impossible for communities to rebuild their agricultural livelihoods. The drying of the Euphrates is contributing to the acceleration of this process, turning what was once a breadbasket for the region into an expanding desert. Another alarming consequence of the Euphrates drying up is the collapse of local fisheries, which were once a vital source of food and income for thousands of people living along the river. The Euphrates supported a diverse ecosystem of fish and aquatic life that was critical to the survival of many communities. Fish were not only a staple of local diets, but the fishing industry also provided employment for many people in the region. As the river's water levels have dropped, so too have fish populations, leaving fishermen without a way to support themselves. The collapse of the local fishing industry has further contributed to the growing humanitarian crisis in the region, as people who relied on the river for both food and livelihood are now struggling to survive. Beyond its immediate ecological and economic impacts, the drying of the Euphrates holds deep cultural and spiritual implications. For millennia, the river has been revered as sacred in many cultures and religions. The significance of the Euphrates is mentioned in religious texts such as the Bible, where it is described as one of the 4 rivers that flowed out of the Garden of Eden. The river has also played a crucial role in Islamic eschatology, where its drying up is interpreted as a sign of the impending end of days. As the Euphrates continues to dry, religious communities across the Middle East and beyond are grappling with the spiritual ramifications of what they see as a profound and disturbing event. For many, the drying of the Euphrates is more than just an environmental catastrophe. It is a sign that humanity has reached a critical juncture and that divine intervention may soon follow. The uncovering of ancient ruins and relics beneath the dried riverbed has only added to the eerie atmosphere surrounding the event. Archaeologists have long known that the Euphrates concealed a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, but the sheer scale and significance of what has been uncovered are staggering. Entire cities that once thrived thousands of years ago have been revealed, offering a glimpse into the lives of the people who once lived along the river. In some areas, archaeologists have found evidence of advanced irrigation systems, complex religious structures, and intricate artwork that speaks to the sophistication of the ancient Mesopotamian civilizations. These discoveries are rewriting our understanding of early human history, but they are also a stark reminder of how easily civilizations can rise and fall. As the ruins of ancient cities emerge from the Euphrates, they stand as a warning of what can happen when societies fail to manage their natural resources wisely. One of the most unsettling discoveries to come out of the drying up of the Euphrates is the uncovering of ancient tombs and burial sites. In several locations along the river, archaeologists have uncovered mass graves containing the remains of thousands of people who were buried there thousands of years ago. These graves offer a window into the ancient world, revealing details about how these early civilizations handled death and burial practices. But they also raise disturbing questions about what other secrets may be hidden beneath the riverbed. Some of the tombs that have been uncovered appear to belong to royalty or high-ranking officials, while others suggest mass deaths, possibly from wars or epidemics. The grim nature of these discoveries has fueled speculation about what other terrifying secrets might lie beneath the surface as the river continues to recede. While the ancient ruins and burial sites uncovered by the drying up of the Euphrates are fascinating from an archaeological perspective, they are also a grim reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of environmental and societal collapse. The civilizations that once flourished along the river were some of the most advanced of their time, yet they ultimately fell into ruin and were forgotten by history. As the Euphrates dries up, the echoes of these ancient collapses are becoming impossible to ignore. The parallels between the environmental degradation that contributed to the fall of these early societies and the current situation facing the region are striking. Just as the ancient Mesopotamians failed to sustainably manage their water resources, the modern world is grappling with its own failure to address the environmental challenges that threaten to bring about a new era of collapse. The drying up of the Euphrates is also shedding light on the geopolitical dimensions of water scarcity in the Middle East. The region has long been a flashpoint for conflicts over natural resources, and water is no exception. As the river's flow has diminished, tensions between the countries that share its waters, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, have intensified. Turkey's control over the headwaters of the Euphrates through the construction of large dams has given it significant leverage over its downstream neighbors. This has led to accusations from Iraq and Syria that Turkey is withholding water and exacerbating the crisis. The drying of the Euphrates has thus become a source of geopolitical friction, with the potential to spark new conflicts in a region already beset by war and instability. The geopolitical implications of the Euphrates drying up extend beyond the Middle East. As water becomes an increasingly scarce resource, competition for access to it is likely to become a major driver of conflict in the years ahead. The Euphrates is not the only river in the world facing severe water shortages. Rivers such as the Nile, the Colorado, and the Ganges are also under threat from overuse, dam construction, and climate change. The drying of the Euphrates is thus a microcosm of a much larger global crisis, where access to water is becoming one of the most critical issues of our time. If the international community does not take action to address the root causes of water scarcity, the Euphrates may be only the first of many major rivers to disappear, with devastating consequences for the regions that depend on them. The continued drying up of the Euphrates River has profound implications for the balance between natural ecosystems, socioeconomic stability, and the long-term survival of civilizations that have grown dependent on the river. Beyond the immediate and visible consequences, this gradual disappearance hints at more insidious effects, including ecosystem collapse, migration crises, economic destabilization, and even spiritual and psychological impacts. As the river's life-giving flow dwindles further, the implications for biodiversity, human health, regional economies, and even global security grow ever more alarming. There are layers to this crisis that extend beyond the physical environment and venture deep into the socio-political, economic, and existential realms. One often overlooked consequence of the Euphrates drying up is its impact on biodiversity. The river has been home to a range of aquatic species that are now facing extinction due to the loss of their habitat. Fish populations, which once flourished, have plummeted due to a combination of reduced water levels, increased water temperatures, and a lack of oxygen. Aquatic plants, essential to the health of the ecosystem, have been decimated by the changing water chemistry as the river shrinks. The drying up of this vital waterway also impacts terrestrial wildlife, many species of which rely on the river's ecosystem for survival. Birds, amphibians, and mammals that depend on the Euphrates for food and water are either migrating to other regions, if they can find suitable habitats, or dying off as their ecosystem collapses. This loss of biodiversity is not only tragic from an ecological standpoint, but also has significant knock-on effects for the broader environment, which may never recover fully from such widespread species loss. This environmental degradation inevitably impacts human populations. Entire communities that once relied on fishing as their primary means of sustenance are now destitute, having lost their food source and livelihoods. This is a devastating blow, especially for those who live in rural areas and lack alternative means of income. As these communities lose their economic base, they are forced to migrate in search of new opportunities. Mass migration, however, brings its own set of challenges, both for the migrants and for the regions to which they relocate. Migrants often settle in urban centers where there are already strained resources, contributing to overcrowding, unemployment, and the risk of social unrest. The loss of the Euphrates River thus becomes a root cause of a new wave of environmental refugees, as the populations that once flourished in harmony with the river are left with no choice but to abandon their homes. The mass displacement resulting from the river's disappearance raises the stakes for regional politics. Water scarcity has long been a flashpoint for conflict, but the situation is exacerbated when combined with the pressures of migration. Countries that share the Euphrates water sources, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, are experiencing heightened tensions as they vie for control over what remains of the river's dwindling resources. As rural communities relocate to urban centers, the competition for limited water supplies increases, often pitting different groups against one another. In a region already fraught with sectarian and ethnic divisions, the added pressure of water scarcity and migration can easily ignite existing tensions. The situation becomes even more volatile when political factions exploit these divisions, turning water into a tool of power and coercion. For instance, control over what remains of the Euphrates may give one faction leverage over others, leading to a dangerous power imbalance that could fuel further conflict. At the heart of the Euphrates crisis lies a fundamental issue of governance and resource management. The river's demise is not solely the result of natural causes or climate change. It has also been hastened by decades of mismanagement. The construction of dams along the river, especially in Turkey, has had a catastrophic effect on downstream water flow, depriving Syria and Iraq of the water they need to sustain their populations. This manipulation of water resources has become a geopolitical weapon, with nations upstream controlling access to this essential resource. As the Euphrates continues to dry up, the inequalities in water distribution become even more pronounced, fueling accusations of water apartheid. Those with political or economic power, be it governments, large corporations, or wealthy landowners, can secure their access to water, while marginalized communities are left to suffer the consequences. This deepens the divide between rich and poor, urban and rural, exacerbating existing social inequalities and further destabilizing the region. The collapse of the Euphrates River system also has profound economic implications. Agriculture, which has been a cornerstone of the region's economy for thousands of years, is now in freefall. Without access to water for irrigation, farmers are unable to cultivate crops, leading to massive food shortages. This not only threatens food security in the Middle East, but also contributes to global food instability. As the region produces less food, it becomes more dependent on imports, which can drive up food prices on the global market. This, in turn, increases inflation and economic instability worldwide, as countries that rely on Middle Eastern grain and other agricultural products face supply shortages. The collapse of agriculture in the Euphrates region thus has a ripple effect, contributing to a global economic crisis that could threaten the stability of food systems in far-flung areas of the world. In addition to agriculture, other sectors of the economy are being hit hard by the loss of the Euphrates. The river has long been a crucial transportation route, facilitating the movement of goods and people across the region. As the water levels drop, shipping becomes more difficult, and river trade comes to a standstill. This not only affects the flow of goods within the region, but also disrupts international trade routes, as the Middle East has long been a crossroads for global commerce. The decline of the Euphrates as a transportation artery also hampers tourism, particularly in Iraq and Syria, where ancient sites along the river once drew visitors from around the world. The loss of tourism revenue further strains national economies that are already struggling to cope with the effects of war, political instability, and now, environmental disaster. The spiritual and psychological impact of the Euphrates drying up cannot be overstated. For many people in the region, the river is more than just a source of water. It is a symbol of life, fertility, and divine providence. In various religious traditions, the Euphrates holds a special place as a sacred river mentioned in holy texts such as the Bible and the Quran. Its drying up is therefore seen by some as a sign of the end times, leading to a sense of existential dread and fear of what the future holds. This has caused an emotional and psychological toll on communities already grappling with the practical consequences of the river's decline. People are experiencing not only the loss of their livelihoods and homes, but also a deep sense of dislocation and spiritual despair. This collective trauma could have long-lasting effects on the mental health and social cohesion of the affected populations. The erosion of cultural heritage is another significant consequence of the river's disappearance. The Euphrates has been a witness to thousands of years of human history, and its banks are home to some of the world's most important archaeological sites. Ancient cities, temples, and burial grounds that once thrived along the river are now exposed to the elements as the water recedes. While this has led to some remarkable archaeological discoveries, it also puts these sites at risk of destruction. Without the protective barrier of the river, ancient ruins are now vulnerable to erosion, looting, and vandalism. The drying of the Euphrates is therefore not only a loss of environmental resources, but also a loss of cultural memory. The history embedded in the river's banks is slowly being erased, leaving future generations with fewer connections to their past. As these ancient sites are uncovered, they reveal more than just historical artifacts. They also tell stories of resilience and adaptation. Ancient civilizations along the Euphrates were no strangers to environmental challenges. They developed sophisticated irrigation systems, agricultural techniques, and social structures to cope with the river's changing flow. Yet, despite their ingenuity, many of these civilizations ultimately collapsed, succumbing to the very forces they sought to control. The parallels between these ancient collapses and the current situation facing the Euphrates are striking. Like their predecessors, modern societies are grappling with the challenge of managing scarce water resources in an increasingly unpredictable environment. The lessons of the past are clear. Societies that fail to adapt to environmental change are doomed to decline. The question now is whether the modern world can learn from these lessons before it's too late. The loss of the Euphrates River also raises important ethical questions about humanity's relationship with the natural world. For centuries, humans have altered the course of rivers, dammed their waters, and exploited their resources for economic gain. While these actions have brought short-term benefits, they have often come at a great cost to the environment and future generations. The drying up of the Euphrates is a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked exploitation of natural resources. It forces us to confront the ethical implications of our actions and consider whether we have a moral obligation to protect the environment for the benefit of future generations. The crisis of the Euphrates is thus not just a regional or environmental issue, it is a moral and philosophical one as well. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us? What do you think caused the Euphrates River to dry up? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.